situation as it applies to protests in New South Wales. How can it be that a protest can take place in the state and there's a swastika tattooed on the Star of David on a poster in the middle of the city, or photos of the Ayatollah, the leader of Iran, or posters or flags of Hezbollah or Hamas, the terrorist leader Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah's leader, a big framed portrait of that leader walking down the streets of Sydney, shirts saying death to the IDF, other shirts that says all Zionists are neo-Nazis. There was a sign that said all Zionists are neo-Nazis. So look, if there's a concept, and I think it's true, in other aspects of the law and government policy that words ultimately lead to actions, then how can we say that protests that have these signs have no bearing on either the culture, the temperature, or even extreme actions within our community? Of course this needs to be investigated. It's a central part of what happened last Sunday, and through a royal commission and the criminal proceedings, that's exactly what will happen. But in the meantime, I'm urging lawmakers in New South Wales not to bury their head in the sand and say that there's absolutely no relationship between the two. As I've said repeatedly, in some instances, the organisers of these protests are unleashing forces that they can't control, and that's our job as the New South Wales government. Lastly, before I pass over to the Police Minister, I want to make it clear that we support Canterbury Council's decision in relation to a prayer hall in Bankstown, their decision to close that down because it's an illegal premises and it doesn't meet the circumstances or the conditions of its permission. Now that's an important step made by that council. We've been in discussions with the Mayor and the General Manager for several days now. This is important. This is an important change, not just for that community, but for New South Wales. And I want to make it clear, it's not the end of the matter. We need to make decisive steps, whether it's through planning law or hate speech, to send a message to those who are intent on putting hate in people's heart or spreading racism in our community, that they will be met with the full force of the law. And that's exactly what's happened today. So I'm going to pass over to Yasmin.
Thanks so much, Premier. As the Premier has just said, last night in the Legislative Assembly, we passed the legislation to strengthen safety in our community. The changes that we saw last night will strengthen oversight, improve enforcement and reduce risk. And that is exactly what we need. It will give police the powers that they need to ensure that we have the right people getting guns in New South Wales, obviously in relation to protests and hate speech, the laws that they need for that as well, to bolster that for them, and to ensure that our community is safe. Police want to be part of the solution, and the legislation that was passed last night will enable them to do so. Look, just over a week ago, we know that the terrible situation that we saw, the tragedy, the horrific event in Bondi has changed us forever. And as the Premier just said, the temperature has risen and we need to respond accordingly. We believe that the legislation that passed the Legislative Assembly last night, as the Premier has said, with the Liberal Party, we hope that the same happens in the Legislative Council today. They need to understand the landscape that we are in, and they need to give the police the powers that they need to keep our community safe, and that's what we hope that they do today.
Thanks, Yaz, and we're all happy to take questions.
Premier, Amnesty Australia say that they're already seeing taking abuse directed towards them as a result of political rhetoric linking them, their movement and their allies to this act of terror. You said that words lead to actions. Do you accept that your words could be playing a role in that?
No, I don't. And if the call is for the status quo, for nothing to change, to return to the circumstances before Sunday, I reject that. We need change in New South Wales, whether it's hate speech, whether it's confronting people that divide our community. It can be non-negotiable. And that does require me and the government making change, but explaining the reasons for those legislative changes and those reforms. And if I'm doing it in blunt terms, that's important because these are big changes in New South Wales. And I don't think I can beat around the bush about what the implications are for the state. I know it's a big change to ensure there's no Form 1 protest during a terrorism designation. So we need to explain why we've pursued those extraordinary changes in New South Wales. The second point here is the police have shown that they will tackle extremism or racism regardless of who is responsible for it. If you're prepared to attack or marginalise or vilify a Muslim family or a Muslim cleric or a Muslim woman, then the New South Wales Police will protect you just as if you were any other citizen in New South Wales. And the truth of the matter is, we genuinely acknowledge, because of the nature of scarves and headwear worn by Muslim women, they are subject to more vilification and harassment. I know that. That's exactly why we've got these laws in place. They apply to everyone. The sanctions will apply to anyone who breaches them. Look, I'm very reluctant to front run the court. All I will say is that we've run our legislation thoroughly through the Crown Solicitor. We are alive to the threat from the High Court and a reversal of these changes. And in some cases that's tempered us in terms of rushing into bills. In other cases we don't think we can wait, but we're all confident that they're sound constitutionally. But I'm not second guessing or I guess front running the High Court. They've got to make the decision on it, but we're comfortable. In fact, I don't want to say that. We're confident these laws will withstand a constitutional challenge.
Yesterday, Port Police a large amount of information about the alleged perpetrators of this attack, including bombs that didn't go off. They've been training for months. How concerned are you by all that evidence?
Well, I mean, it's hugely concerning, and it's an indication that as dreadful and as appalling as that terrorism crime was on Sunday, their intention, seemingly, based on the evidence, was to do even worse. And I think that's a credit to New South Wales Police, first responders who were on the scene. You know, I'm glad in many cases the Police Minister and the Police Commissioner have been able to speak about some of the stories of our police officers and the danger that they were in the last week. It is a difficult and dangerous job, and we put often young people in harm's way. We would love to make things safer for them, but the truth of the matter is we don't have a choice, we need them. So anyone who commits their professional life to being a police officer, everybody in New South Wales owes you a huge debt of gratitude, and we thank you for the job that you're doing. Even in the context of Sunday's horrible events, New South Wales Police saved lives.
You confirmed yesterday that you received a briefing on the 3-year delay to G outcomes gun licence. We now know that he bought his final shotgun after applying for and receiving permission on the same day. That was just months before he carried out the incident. I just wanted to ask, can you tell us any more about this briefing, potentially who gave it to you? And also, do you accept there's been a massive failure of firearms licensing that process, that he can apply for and be accepted on the same day, to buy a gun that he later used just months later?
Yeah, look, I mean, I would say I accept there's been failures across the board. I mean, I would give anything to ensure that we didn't have Sunday again. I mean, or to stop it from happening in the first place. So I don't think we have to go into this Royal Commission, these inquiries, with humility. That's from me right through the New South Wales government. The only thing we can do about yesterday is learn from it, but I'm determined that we do that. The second point about the delay in relation to the granting of a licence, the latest information that we have is that there was a real mess in relation to the bureaucracy when it comes to gun licences, and the delay is related to that, not a specific threat. That's the latest information that we have, but as it updates or if it changes, of course we'll let the public know. I don't think so, not to my knowledge, but you know, I'm answering these questions in the context of releasing information, also aware that there needs to be a full inquiry into everything that's happened so that we don't have the same mistakes.
The protest laws give the government power to have the terrorist coordination in place for 3 months, up to 3 months, to stop all ones getting through. How long will this specific terror designation stay in place before it's enforced?
Yeah, well, I mean, the term can be 3 months. It must be determined by the Police Commissioner. The Police Commissioner will make the call in relation to that. So I'm not going to speculate on his designation other than to say that he's reiterated our concerns about rising temperatures and the challenges of resourcing and divisions in our community. And I expect, noting that it's his decision, that he will make and take decisive action in relation to it once or if the laws pass it. It needs to be reaffirmed every 14 days. So he'll make that designation, but I want to make it clear that I want a summer of calm, and I expect a summer of calm. I think that a big mass protest through the heart of Sydney at the moment would be ruinous for our unity, and I don't resolve from that. I think that's important I say it.
Does your laws cover static protests? For instance, can a protest at Cronulla Beach go ahead, or can you stop that money?
Yeah, that's all right. Look, there's a few things. Firstly, we've made it really clear that if there's a gathering on the side of the street or if people meet in the park, there's nothing that any government can do about it. But taking over the streets, marching down major streets, can be challenged by the New South Wales Police, depending on the passage of this law today. However, if someone's using a rally to breach other standards in New South Wales or other laws, hate speech laws, or if it's regarded as a breach to the public or the peace, then police can exercise... Sorry. There's a bug on me. Sorry about that.
All over the front.
Thanks, Michael. That's heaps better. I'll start again. Police can exercise leper powers. So there are other changes in place that they can utilise to keep the public safe, and they've shown in the recent past that they're prepared to do exactly that. If someone's going to have a racist rally, however, then they can expect it to be shut down immediately. Police are on guard for those changes, and they won't tolerate anyone attempting to use overt racism in our community and attempt to intimidate big sections of this state's population.
Premier, yesterday a group of protesters at Town Hall chanted "Mobilise the Intifada." That was in opposition or in response to protests of the laws. This morning Josh Lee said, ironically, your words about mobilising the Intifada might make the phrase even more popular in the movement. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of... It's a serious moment for New South Wales, and it's almost like a troll-like response, like it's a big game. I don't think it's a big game. I think the consequences here are serious. They're massive. The implications for families and communities are huge, and I don't think it's ironic. I'm calling it out. I do think it leads to violence in our community. I think it leads to disharmony. I think it must be part of changes to the law that we're proposing in New South Wales. Just want to point out to everybody, by the way, I mean, a big part of that group's message to the people of New South Wales is that you can trust them. Yeah, that there might be some fringe elements, but you can trust them. We were repeatedly assured that yesterday's protest was going to be a peaceful vigil for the lives that were lost on last Sunday. Instead, we're treated to calls or chants of globalise the Intifada. I think that tells you everything you need to know about what it can mean if we don't have bright red lines in relation to protests in New South Wales in the context of a terrorism event. I think the verdict's in. After 2 years, after the marches, after the division, after the huge police resources that have gone into it, the verdict is in. This will divide our community.
Premier, Wayne Swan retweeted a post on X that said Jewish people boo Alba MP on arrival at Bondi, Israel, but they support Netanyahu, who allowed 1,200 Israelis to be slaughtered by Hamas, then murdered 70,000 innocent people in Gaza.
Yeah.
Do you condemn that?
Yeah, look, I do. It's terrible. He shouldn't have said it. I don't know why he said it. Look, I know that there were boos there on the weekend, but not everybody booed. This is the thing about roping everybody into the actions of 1 or 2 or 10 or however many people. It's not fair. We're seeing this over and over again when it comes to protests or meetings or the like. There needs to be some restraint on what's been said, particularly from prominent members of our community and former leaders of the country.
How can we be so sure these protest restrictions are just constitutionally sound of when the Move On power you brought in to move on protesters in the face of worship was struck down by the court? Presumably you also had the license listed there. So what makes you so sure this time?
Look, I mean, again, the advice we've got is that it's constitutional. If it's going to be challenged in the court, I'm going to have to leave that up to the court. But I wouldn't introduce a bill that I didn't believe was sound, and also I wouldn't introduce a reform that I didn't think was absolutely necessary to keep the people of New South Wales safe.
Premier, on the Royal Commission, Premier, would you be happy to drop the New South Wales Royal Commission if the federal one was announced? And do you have concerns that New South Wales won't have the jurisdiction to go into those federal agencies? I know you said yesterday they be cooperative, but when push comes to shove,
Yeah.
it might not be the case. Is it your position rather a federal one?
Look, I mean, I don't know what I do the federal government's made it clear their position in relation to a Royal Commission, so, I can't answer in hypotheticals about what we would do, whether we'd run it in tandem or not, or whether, I don't know. It's not going to happen, so we've got to get on with the one in New South Wales. When it comes to the second part of your question, I genuinely haven't turned my mind to it. I expect that we'd get cooperation, of course, but I'd have to take further advice.
Can I please ask you to consider that kind of thing? Will you agree?
No, I'm not. I've answered that question. There's a lot of questions here.
Is it
Yes,
something that you would be open to doing?
Fareed, go ahead. But I can't. I mean, the situation's very clear. I can only deal with the cards that I'm dealt. But they've been very clear about it. I mean, I can only deal with what the situation as it currently is. They've been very clear about it. I have to. I've got to get on with my job. Fareed. Sorry, I think it's reasonable that I go around to everybody.
Across the political spectrum, you've received criticism. Some of the strongest criticism has come from within your own party, saying that it's a betrayal to the values, it's a betrayal to your colleagues who marched in the breach, including members of the cabinet. What do you say to that? And what do you say also about the consequences that you said are very serious? Have you thought about the consequences long term after maybe you leave politics, about if this stays permanently in New South Wales, how that will also curtail other rights, other protests, if it's for workers' rights?
Well, I mean, I can't speak to, and I'm not responsible for future governments and their decisions, but I am responsible for what's happening in Sydney today. And I know that there are people opposed to it, and there are people that I've got sincere, there are, in normal circumstances, people that have opposed the government's position here I've got respect for. But I'm firmly of the view that we need to take action, and that maybe even despite the best efforts of the protest organisers, we have seen hate speech and hate signs on the streets of Sydney. And if in every other part of reform and change in New South Wales we believe that words lead to actions, why would we say that those words don't lead to actions in other parts of the city? I think that they do.
Your words lead to actions as well. 2 years of denial.
Yeah,
You just said the verdict is in.
but I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Fareed, but I'd stand by my words. I mean, what aspects of what I've said as a public official, as the Premier of New South Wales, would you take issue with?
That you specifically targeted this group without naming them, the Palestine Action Group. Yesterday, talking about these territories without referring to Palestinian territories, that you were specifically honed in on this issue rather than other issues that are also in consideration.
Fareed, it's not, I mean, I respect your question, but it's not true. I remember holding a press conference at exactly this point 3 weeks ago about a neo-Nazi protest at the front of Parliament 3 or 4 weeks ago. I mean, I would genuinely say to you, when we have seen hate speech, we have taken action. But when we do see hate speech, we can't turn away from it. Even if it's an uncomfortable conversation, even if it is coming or directed from the Palestinian Action Group, we have to call it out. I mean, think about the reverse situation, where I said, look, I can't go into specific groups, I won't be able to tell you what protesters. I think Sydney siders would be scratching their heads and saying, well, what are you going on about then? I need to be specific. This is what's been happening on the streets of Sydney. We've got to call it out and we have to change.
Premier, what will your gun law changes mean for Winter Olympics athletes who might need to use straight or firearms in the coming months after the Olympics? Or what are the implications for them as a result of these situations?
Yeah, my advice is that there are exemptions in place for our Olympians, but we're not going to have exemptions that you can drive a truck through and have it in common use in the public. I mean, we need to make a change there.
Premier, you said that your government needs to do more on hate speech laws. You're sitting on the John Sacco report into hate speech protections for vulnerable communities. That was presented to the government in November. Why hasn't that been released when the Parliament is considering this issue?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'll look at the best time to get that report out.
On the Premier, what involvement the New South Wales government have in terms of the action taken against the council?
Yeah, look, I've got to take my hat off to Bilal, the Mayor of Canterbury Bankstown. He's taken decisive action in relation to this. They've been in conversation with both us and the planning department for a number of days, as well as New South Wales Police. And this is the kind of leadership that we need right now. Bilal has led that community for a number of years. He's obviously decided this can't go on. It's not being used for the purposes in which the permit had been released. You can expect more of this, not less of it, in the weeks to come. Okay, I've got other stuff to do, so just a couple more questions. Sure.
Historically, we've seen large public gatherings during Christmas, particularly at places like Bondi and nearby Bondi. Are you concerned about large public gatherings for Christmas, and will you have additional police resources to try and increase the safety and security of residents?
Yes, the police will work closely with the community. They already have a great relationship with the local councils there, and the councils are aware of any large gatherings that they're expecting, and they will absolutely be working hand in glove with them and making sure that they have the resources they need. Just remembering that the police always do an in-depth risk assessment for every event that they know is on in the city, and we know they do thousands in the city, and they will assess the risk and they will apply the correct amount of police for that risk.
When the council has asked that we don't see large gatherings at Bondi like we have in the past, are there concerns we see that anyway, and one additional resource that we deployed to Bondi as important?
Well, they are working with the council and they're having discussions in relation to that. They're asking people to be sensible, and I'm hopeful that that's the case, but they will make sure the resources are there that are required for that event to take place.
So is there any concerns about resourcing, considering it is Christmas, and obviously police need to get involved with some of the families as well? Are very concerned about resourcing and having enough boots on the ground?
Well, I think, again, as the Premier said, we all owe a deep level of gratitude to our police officers. They'll be working this Christmas and New Year just like they do every year, and we thank them very much for that.
Thanks, everybody.